Hello, 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 hello. Oh my goodness, it has been months. I am embarrassed to say that I haven't been keeping up with YouTube in a very long time. And for that matter, I haven't been keeping up with writing for a very long time to my own dismay and detriment. I haven't been as attentive to YouTube as I had liked, and I hope I could remedy that. More important, I wanted to hop on and talk about how to and um, perhaps on a more fundamental level, why to annotate books. Also, side note, because I'm very technologically uh, disinclined, this is on a weird incline in the background. So no, I'm not in a room that's going downhill or uphill. I just couldn't get the camera to be in the right setting. I made peace with that. I hope you will too. Annotating helps readers absorb books, especially behemoths like War and Peace. And you might have seen people on Bookstagram annotate books to death, or in your mind, it might be something that transports you back to high school when you were graded for annotations in your literature class. Whatever the case may be, I think annotating serves a useful purpose. It helps elevate one's reading experience, and it does so really by being an exercise of the heart and mind, really. What I mean by that is it makes us more empathetic as humans, more attentive to details. It also makes us more aware of connecting the logical dots when it comes to plot, character analysis. It engages our critical thinking. On a more personal level, for me, I think annotating has um, helped me orient and zone in on a reading in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise. It helps me concentrate and focus. This is particularly true because I feel like I've been scarred from law school days where I just hated law school so much that I would just sit there and zone out whenever a professor would have a lecture or when people would speak about law. And I would find myself just completely shutting off any sort of comprehension in the sense that I just wouldn't pay attention to what they're saying. And this has been, to my fault, something that I've carried past law school. It's like some weird traumatic thing from law school. I don't know. So, me personally, with regard to annotating, I think it just brings me back to a point of comfort. And I think that's because whenever I annotate, I'm more engaged. I feel more concentrated and focused on whatever it is that I might be reading in a given time. And really, I think it helps and has helped and will probably continue to help. Annotating books helped me regain attention. It was, in a sense, a meditative process that allowed me to regain control of my own attention, if that at all makes sense. All of this to say that annotating has been a practice of meditation for me. It has helped me rewire and flex the muscles that I find important with regard to being a more attentive person, being someone who is there 100% in both thought and action. And so it's a good exercise to have. It's a good skill to develop. And when I say skill, it's not something that is difficult to acquire. So with that said, how do I personally go about annotating? It's a question I'm often asked on Instagram, and I don't really have a methodical approach other than the following that I'm about to share with you. I, of course, don't do this with every book that I read, only the ones that I find I'll be returning to in life as a guide and resource to navigate life. So, more often than not, the very first steps of the annotating journey entail grabbing the book and a few sticky notes or tabs that you might have on hand. The ones I like to use, I found on Instagram, and or the ones I like to use, I found on Amazon, and I'm more than happy to share the exact link. They're a lovely color, as you can see here, and they come with a ruler, which has been helpful, underlining them, not in bed and just all over the place with zigzags instead of straight lines. But in truth, the details of what instruments to use, what types of pens or pencils to use are meh, they're just not entirely consequential. Really, what matters is using whatever instrument you might have on hand and whatever you think will make you a more attentive reader. And that can mean no instrument at all other than a pair of eyes. So, but what I like to do is usually take a big book, such as War and Peace, by the way, beautiful cover. And I then go ahead and divide, using the top part of the book, divide the book into the various sections that I find. So in War and Peace, it's easy. You have various parts already naturally divided. And then those are further divided into chapters. What I've done here is take the volumes of the book and then divide those. And then within the volumes, you have parts. So I've also divided them accordingly. I find that dividing books into reading sections based on the natural way that the book itself is divided. So, for example, volumes, chapters, parts, etc. Those are that's a useful way of going about things. And then conquering each section helps as motivation for the next. So that's a nice way of sort of progressing through a book, and also just having a visual marker of where you are and how much more you need to go to reach the finish line. I don't use highlighters because they often remind me of law school and outlining days, so I forego that. I use pens over pencil almost in every scenario. I write directly on the pages. I underline, I write in the margins, I draw stars around passages that I like. And like I said in a previous video, books are not artifacts to be stored in a museum. My books aren't. I most certainly like the visual aspect of having engaged with a book. And to me, that means jotting down notes and thoughts as they come, and really visually making it so that the book has become part of you, and you've left some sort of mark on the book. What do I usually write is another question that I often get, and that would be, simply put, my reactions to passages, themes that I notice, observational tidbits, the writer's voice popping out from the page, characters' evolution, their complexities. Often it just comes down to good notes that I'll mark and then come back to and try to analyze and connect with other passages or other books or articles I may have read. And so with that, you sort of build this interesting network of things that strike your mind as interesting. Doing this for a while then helps you connect and create that network of learning, and it's a nice visual way of having interacted with a book. Do I annotate all my books? I certainly do not. I only annotate the ones I think have a message to convey beyond plot. I annotate things that are relatable to other things I may be reading in a given time or in the past. I certainly don't annotate for the purpose of then thinking I'm going to be, let's say, tested on a subject. So it's really just a very individualistic approach, and very much aligned towards towards the preferences that I have, and those are very personal. So to you, annotating might mean something completely different. My one advice would be not to fear writing in books, or really making the books look like they've lived a life separate from simply sitting on a bookshelf. And whether that means taking a pen, a pencil, a highlighter, whatever writing instrument you have, and going to town on the margins, or just simply indicating favorite passages with a dot, it really doesn't matter as long as you come to the same purpose of annotating. And that can be summed up by just trying your best to elevate your reading experience, to really interact with the story and find a way to connect to it beyond the script in front of you, beyond the words that are there on the page. When looking at what I've annotated most in the past, it's most certainly been fiction, and I think there's a connection there that's worth exploring, because most glaring becomes the point that fiction really does make us more attentive as readers, and by extension as people in relation to one another. And annotating, in a sense, is an exercise in that. Like I said before, I've caught myself so many times just tuning out people when they're telling me a story that I immediately categorize and process as irrelevant. I've also caught myself feeling almost daily the urge to drop an hour of undistracted reading in this hyper multitasking era of ours, and because I felt guilty for spending time on reading when I could be doing XYZ. But then comes fiction, and then comes annotating fiction. It is a struggle these days to read, but each fiction book that I finish, it becomes a much needed exercise in attentiveness. And that's largely in part due to the way I've interacted with a book, the annotating that I've done. So when other tasks rob me of my love for being attentive and caring and slow, fiction envelopes me back into a familiar embrace. And that's largely due to, again, annotating fiction. How does fiction and how does annotating fiction, how do these things do that? I think fiction gives readers an opportunity to seize the non-normative parts of life. And George Saunders, in his book, A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, really touches on this. And what are the non-normative parts? They're the things that stick out as oddities without explanation. Saunders calls it dragging a cart labeled things I couldn't help noticing whenever you're reading a book. Annotating these parts, the things that stick out to you whenever you're reading, then becomes an exercise of really taking a pause, a meditative pause, and just making sure that you've mentally jotted down something that strikes you as curious, for example. Saunders writes, as you encounter an excess in a story, some non-normative aspect, you enter into a transactional relationship with the writer, hoping your toleration of moods, boredom, perplexing, irritation, confusion, hatred of a character, etc., will pay off. A good story, he writes, is one that, having created a pattern of excesses, notices those excesses and converts them into virtues. And so it's with reading and it's with annotating that maybe we, as writers of our own lives, or as spectators or readers of a life that destiny has written for us, if that's what you think, can also learn to convert excesses and oddities into virtue and purpose. It's how, when Kafka writes that Gregor awoke one night from unsettling dreams, changed in his bed into a monstrous vermin, Saunders reminds us our reaction, impossible incident, man turned into bug. That reaction is a patient, attentive one that's waiting to see what comes next. And so in life too, being more attentive to whatever comes our way helps us and prepares us for whatever is to come next. So I really hope that you find time not only to read, but also to dig a layer deeper and annotate and see if it's a good fit for you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have with regard to annotating, so please feel free to reach out. Until then, my very warm bye-bye, and I'll see you next time. Bye.